people. It's at 11, so we'll start maybe around 11:05. We will just start. But thanks for just joining. I kept all of you in mute so that we are able to just connect with Meera comfortably once she's just, we are all ready. Thank you so much. Meera, whenever you're ready, just let us know.
I am. Do we get started or do we wait?
No, we will just wait. But meanwhile, I just wanted to. Talk to you, and we'll just casually just talk about it. So the rest of the members will get to know about it, and soon, in a while, we'll just kick start. Is that
Sure,
okay?
sure. Works for me. And I'm going to share my video as well.
First of all, thank you for just joining us, and it is really a pleasure. Your journey itself is inspiring, and the way we got inspired, I'm sure our society is also going to see that. Thanks for just joining me. It's really awesome to be with you today.
Thank you so much. That's just being kind and supportive at this moment. Thanks so much for that. I'm just looking forward to the opportunity to interact with people. I think this is going to be good. And what I am looking forward to is just hearing from people. I've seen the kind of questions that have gotten submitted. So it's quite nice to see how humble beginnings people have, just as I have, and I think most of us have. So I think it's good to interact and just see if there are questions that I can really answer. And hopefully through the discussion, through the next 30 minutes, hopefully people have had their questions answered. I think you're on mute. Is it just me?
Really? Yes. Yes. Is it better?
Yes. Now I can hear you. Yes.
I said we will take a privilege to introduce you to the team so that people also know about you. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Dear all, it's a pleasure to bring Meera with us, and as she rightly said about it, she herself is the inspiration. She started from nowhere, I would say, in a process part of it, and where she has reached, and she also had a break, and then find out the career. So she's the right person to talk about. Technology is just the technology as long as you're ready and everything is in your hand. So that's a message she is just carrying, and she is also doing an excellent job in automation in HP itself. She is with 10 years, and then yesterday when we chat, she was just saying even the 10 years doesn't seem to be so long, Mandla, because everything is new for me and I keep learning about it. That's where I reinvent myself. So it is indeed a message for all of us, and her journey is going to share some news to us and inspiration and the start of a new journey for us. Meera, over to you, and she is just having an excellent way of walking through the journey with the technology trends, what we're supposed to be doing. So all our queries have been just addressed, but in case if we feel the queries are not answered, we will have a separate Q&A session. There's a chat session. Just feel free to push your questions over here. And Meera, over to you. Awesome. Welcome you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and that's a very very deep introduction. I think I hope I can live up to that. And if there is anything at all, feel free to stop me. We're going to start off with a prop here. How many of you know this? What this is on my screen right now? If you don't, I can introduce you because I'm a mother as well. So this is a unicorn, and this is something. I think people are going to chat, and if you're comfortable to unmute, feel free to do so as well. Thanks so much, Namrata. Yes, it is a unicorn. And I got introduced to this like about 2 years ago. Right now, my daughter's 6 years, and I got introduced to it like when she was 4.5. I think what's to mark out about unicorns is the fact that they have these cutie marks. I don't know if you know this, but this is a cutie mark right here, which is near the tail. And the reason why these are to be called out for is because they have some special powers. And I think they're very, very similar to human beings. Each one of us have our own special powers. We're just waiting for that cutie mark to be marked on us so that, it's an added benefit and people around us know that, oh, so this is her special power or this is his special power, just so that we remark on it. And I think we'll come back to this in a bit, but I want you to think about the cutie marks that each one of us carry, which means that even you individually carry. Without further ado, let's get started here. And let me know if my screen's moving. Yes, it is. Okay, now it is. All right, so let's just talk about some numbers here. We have about 3.3 billion people who were employed in 2018. Just like you and me, there are 3.3 billion other people. Just for a second to absorb that. And I think what's been always something that's been agreed upon is only 5% of that is automatable. So there is a whole lot out there which will never be automated, at least for a long time. The understanding is because only 5% of it can be even looked at in multiple ways. We can slice up things, we can look at things, and there are series of automations, how things happen and how the journey really evolves. And I think what's important for us to know is that this number is not something that's new. And this number is not something that's come in just now. It's been there for a while now. So that 5% has stayed in the industry for a very, very long time. And then we'll see some real live examples. So if you were to talk about what is automation for everybody, I think to me, and this is where I am going to talk a lot about how it makes sense for me as automation, is the fact that it moves things from a mundane or repetitive mode, which means that, say, for example, you come in. Let's just take an example. I come in, I open my mailbox, I clear some of the important emails, but I also get a lot of emails that are trash. And I think those trash are like, I mean, good trash and bad trash. I mean, good trash could be that, oh, my skills are getting improved. I'm getting to know what's happening in the industry. There's also sometimes just the news that comes in, but that is a blocker right now in my mailbox. And that just shows me like I have 100 unread emails, but that's not the reality. So how do we make a mundane work meaningful? Our actionables there are only limited to like few, which means that, is there a question out there? Okay, I'm going to move ahead. Some real life example, like I mentioned, I'm going to share here, is the fact that would you want our scientists to do what is on the left-hand side, which is to key in a lot of data, to make meaningful information out of it? Or would you want them to actually focus on the research that they need to do? Would you want our doctors to key in our information, which means our name, our database, going through our history? Or would you rather that they have conversations with us? I think someone needs to go on mute. I'm not sure.
Yes, please mute it so that others are able to hear. Bhargavi, I think that's you. Yeah, she has done it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. So I think this is where I think the drawing of line comes in. I think we look at automation just in one line solo, the work that we are in. But I think about it, how it impacts the world around us. We would love to walk into a doctor's cabin and actually have that person not look at any screens for the next 30, 40 minutes and have a meaningful conversation with us. And similarly, our scientists to focus on things that are actually meaningful. So that's the data entry that I'm talking about. And this is where I was talking about the 5% of the work really comes in. It's interesting, and think about it for a moment. Automation, as like I mentioned, has not been something new. We've seen this for a very, very long time in our lives. As a child, I was responsible for filling up the checkbooks and submitting the cash withdrawal slips in my bank, which was right opposite my house, but I was responsible for it in my household and to get the cash out. So I had to stand in these long queues. And I don't know how many of you have done this. Maybe there's a generation gap here, but I have done that. So I have stood in queues, withdrawn cash, and come back home and counted it and recounted it and given the the bank statements to my mom and everything. But I think when I took my daughter, like about a couple of years back, just to show her what a bank is, bank was quite empty. And quite interestingly, I actually just went straight to the relationship manager. I could have a conversation. I took her to the ATM and I said, this is where the money comes out. And I tried explaining to her how I used to withdraw cash, which is stand in a queue, go submit the slip, and then have that validated. That person's going to check your bank account and then give you the cash out. And she couldn't really understand why that happened. And I think that's just how meaningful automation is going to be. And I think to a second, this is very, very powerful, because think of it how around us things have been changing. I'm going to take another example which is more recent. I don't know how many of you can relate to this, but this is still a live example, right? This is happening around us in the airports. There was a time that we stood in long queues, which means that we had to stand with our baggage, with our kids, sometimes with, just being sleep deprived in the middle of the night, because most of the flights from India would fly out in the middle of the night, and you would just stand there, or early morning, and you're waiting in those queues, going through these mundane tasks, which is actually not needed. But today, when you walk into an airport, that you have a desk, a kiosk, and you just kind of key in the information and you're in. But does that mean it's all automated right now? Not really. Does that mean it's all perfect right now? Not really. There are times that ATMs break, there are times that kiosks break, and there's a whole lot that happens, right, in technology. But just to keep in mind the bigger picture, the perspective of where we are reaching with automation. And which is why I would sum it up again with, it's lesser paperwork, more professional work. We're not just moving away from paperwork. We are actually looking at how that data can become information for us, and not just information. I think we've also inbuilt, like I was mentioning, there are layers of automation, right? So we have data entry that we would just sit and key in. And by the way, my job started off with data entry. So I did a lot of data entry for a truck leasing company in the US, and I was working in GE in Hyderabad at that time when I started my career. So a lot of data entry work I used to do. I had this system which I don't think even exists today in the world, because it was just black and green. That's it. I'd just key in information, and once you enter, you can never take it back, because that's how ancient the systems were. And I spent, I think, my majority of my time doing just paperwork. Very little with talking to people, trying to understand why the truck leasing business is doing well, or why is it not doing well. How do we build more relationships? I did very little of that. But today, I'm pretty sure if I were to walk into Penske Truck Leasing, that was the organization I worked with at that, with GE, I think I'm pretty sure there would be a whole lot different scenario today. Nobody would be working in those black and green systems. And I think a lot more would have been going into how do we make our receivables more smarter? How do we make, from where we have debts, or where we have buckets where we know for a fact we are never going to retrieve money, how do we make sure that we get money back? So I think a lot of conversations are changing. A lot of way we are doing our business is changing. But is that a bad thing? Not really. I think it's a great thing, because I would love to spend more time on having those conversations than to be just sitting and doing things that I know anybody can do it. And that means that a system can do it. I'll go into the details of the how. And when I say how, it's not just the how of how you and I can think of it, how the industry is thinking of it. I think the whole idea of an intelligent automation, and when I say intelligent automation, it's a step forward. It's not just taking in the data entry as it is, it's adding some more layers of making meaning out of it, is one of the highest priorities in every company. And the reason it is because, again, they want to move away from the existing way of working. What is the existing way of working, for a second? It's changing the labor pyramid. What is today's labor pyramid? You can see on the left hand side, we're very, very heavy. And I think this is already changing in some parts. I can see it changing around me at least. And I'm sure in the industry, there are still places where, like I mentioned, there is enough and more than enough that needs to change. If you see, there's going to be a 70% reduction in labor. But what would that mean? That would mean that we empower the workforce focusing on the value adds, which means what? We reimagine the operating model. What are those people in pink? They are the people who are thinkers, who are the people who are strategically thinking, who are making decisions, who are coming about to say, this is the way we operate. let's change, let's operate this way. Are we saying just because we have lesser labor, we are not going to have, we are going to have lesser jobs? I think that one stigma has to go away. And I think the reason why my talk is a lot focused on it is because every time I talk about RPA, the first questions that come in is there going to be jobs? I think there are a lot of jobs opportunities that have actually opened up with RPA, and with not just RPA, but any kind of automation, any kind of data science that's coming in. It's because we just don't need anybody to focus on doing this. We want a whole lot of people looking at, how can I make sense of what is coming in? How can I take this to the next level? How can I go back to my entire operating model or the business model that exists or the process that exists as it is? How can I improve it? If somebody did not question the bank, we would never have ATMs. If somebody did not question how we operate today in our airports, we would forever, actually, the queues will only keep getting bigger and bigger because people are able to afford more holidays, and hence people are able to go on more, vacation time, plus work requires a lot of travel. I think that would just get worse, which means that someday we'll only keep adding terminals and terminals and terminals. But what would be the point of it? That's the whole question that I think people are asking, and which is why the direction is changing, which means that every time there is a break or a exception, there needs to be a plan around it as well. And for a moment, we're going to come back to the discussion that we had at the start of the presentation about unicorns and QT marks. I think these are some of the roles that I could think of, which I've put in over here. There are a whole lot out there. And I think these roles are constantly changing. They're constantly adding. The way Manjula mentioned about me, in the RPA business, I've been there from the day one of day zero in HP. So, which means I've seen how the plan came up, how the thought process came up, how we originally came up with a plan. We changed it in a few months. Then we changed it, and we changed it. I've gone through so many versions, and I think I've played pretty much all the roles at some point in time. And each one of us had to, because I think it was about figuring out, what am I good at? How am I good at this? Am I really good at this? Or do you think I should do something more of? And at some point in time, we are juggling with more than one roles. And I think that's because it's also new. And while, even though right now it's been 3 years, I would still call it new. It's fairly new. And it's the fact that, we're able to make a difference in whatever we are doing. Then we want to make it, exciting. So keep learning new things over here. Just to touch upon this, right? Like, what's a business growth partner, for example? This is your, also called a funnel manager, or also called your engagement lead, different terminologies, different places. But this is a person who brings in opportunities from a growth perspective, says, here's an opportunity, or here's the current process. This is, if we do an automation, or if we build in some systems or a better, line of working, here's where we are going to be. So this is the profit that's going to come in, or the cash benefits. And not always is everything in profit and cash. There's a whole lot out there which makes sense from, say, a compliance standpoint or from a risk standpoint. So they would bring in, opportunities like that. They interact a whole lot from the business to the analytics guy. What does the analytics and value manager do? These are the people who look at the data that comes in. They try to leverage the cross-functional business data that's available. They have a whole lot of discussion between a data scientist. A data scientist is somebody who would come in, look at collating multiple sources of data, which means that if your source of data, let's again take an example of the same airline industry, right? If your source of data would have been the background, Citrix or SAP systems or whatever that systems are, look at the data source of that model, see how it comes in, what is the current model, how that data is going to make sense, how do we improve the data architecture, how do we improve the information we are getting. All right, so 80% of the population comes in, say, at 6 in the morning. That's good data. That's great data. That's the data scientist's job. That 60% makes a whole lot of difference for the whole day's planning, or for the whole month's planning, or the fact that they would say, on Saturdays, I've noticed there is a trend here, or every holiday there is a trend here. So that is what data scientist brings into the table. And I think it's extremely meaningful, because when we build in, say, for example, like I was mentioning an example, right? There are times that ATMs fail. There are times that these kiosks fail. And this is the data scientist that would make sense. Why does it fail? When does it fail? Is it because of the overload that it fails, or is it because of the fact that, our processes are not designed properly? It's a data scientist's job. Now, when we look at a data engineer, this is, a digital engineer. A digital engineer would be somebody who's looking at driving a digital process, which means that there is an existing process. And how do we like digitize? What are the portions that can be automated? Like my first slide, I go back there. It's only 5% of the automation that can be done, not really everything. And in that 5% is things that don't need a whole lot of thinking. It's just take it, key it in, and give it out. That's it. And I think in all the roles I can keep, and I'm more than happy to go into each one of them. But I think if with the interest of time, I'll just touch upon very key role here, which is a solution evangelist. I think these are architects today who look at your as-is process map, which means how do you operate today? How should we operate later? What parts of it is automatable? What parts of it need to be with a human being? And I think these roles have not started off in RPA. It's very, very interesting. None of these roles have started off in the automation industry from day one. They have evolved, which means that there would have been an SME, as you may call it today in your business. Say, I'm very good at understanding, say, HR processes. I understand the HR process inside out. I can become a transformational lead, or I can become a solution evangelist. How is that possible? Because I know the flaws of the system. I know things that are pain points. I know how well things work in certain areas. I know places where I need to definitely have an expert come in and look at it. That expertise is never going to come in from a system that easily. So then that is a portion I will never look at solutioning it out to giving it out to, say, an automation expert. But I know for a fact there are things that I would rather not focus on. I don't want my energy to go in. Say, for example, every day, when is my pay slip coming in? This is going to be your question from pretty much a whole lot of database. I think like an 80-20 rule. I think a whole lot of questions come in like, am I going to get my pay on the 29th or the 30th or the 1st? These are new joinee questions. When am I going to have the access to my payslip? This is question even for people who have existed, like for me, donkey's year in the industry. Do you think your HR specialist should spend time on it? Not really, because this was one of the questions which came in from the HR side, like how can I look at things? And I'm going to try to answer some of the questions that I've seen. So I think that's where it's important to understand that when you are a subject matter expert, when you understand how things work, whether it's the HR, whether it's the payroll, whether it's the finance system, whether it's the science systems or the healthcare models. Like for example, if you were to walk into a hospital, do you really, as an individual, want to spend time on filling up forms? I don't think I want to, because when I'm walking in, I'm quite stressed out already. I'd rather that I just go straight in and meet a doctor and get my work done. That is this solution evangelist role. I would imagine a life where I just go straight in, I'm talking to a doctor, the doctor's looking at me, not just busy keying in data, not just busy, oh, your name is Meera. Ah, looks like you had a history of this. That conversation doesn't start in immediately. It goes like I start all over again. Hi, I'm Meera. I visited you 2 weeks ago. I told you I have this problem. Do you think you can help me? It's all over again. And that's where the frustration of a patient comes in, right? But imagine if you walked in and the doctor looks at your records and says, oh, you visited me 2 weeks ago and I can see that, you had the same problem, but we tried this, but let's just see how we can do something else here. Or is there an improvement? The conversation straight up seamless. Imagine walking in for a car loan or a bank loan. I have done a bank loans, and I know for a fact during my pregnancy, when I just delivered my daughter, they said mandatory sign in is needed. So I had to take my 1-month-old daughter, less than 1 month, and I had to go into a bank and sign in. And those guys were like, "Oh, we're so sorry. Why are you walking in this state?" But they realized it later. But the rules were rules that I had to walk into the bank. I had to show my face that I am the true Meera Sanghvi, even though I sent in a whole lot of documentation. No, I am the Meera Sanghvi that I'm going to sign in over here, and here I'm signing in. It was ridiculous. But I think these are the processes which a solution evangelist would look at. The transformation lead would look at, saying, let's change the way we do our business. Let's change the way we look at things. Global process owners, again, very, very similar. Like I said, each one of us, the role that we play today is going to change. And in any of these areas we could go into. If you're really good with data, you're really good with Excel, you're really good with, if data speak to you, there are enough movies on it, by the way, if you want to get inspired. But I think there is enough that the data speaks to us. And at one point in time, I thought I would move into the data scientist role because I thought the data spoke to me. But after a point, I just realized I enjoyed a whole lot of different things. So it's like I mentioned, the roles keep changing, and which is what will keep you excited. In every organization, I think these are in some form or another, like they might not be called the same terms, but they exist. Let's just move to the next one. And I think this is where it's going to be very, very interesting for us to talk about how some of the skill sets are needed for the future or even current. I think we touched upon it. And this is where the QT mark really comes in from the unicorn, example. Creativity and innovation. Why is it that we need to be creative and innovative? It's because I think we need to think of business problems in a different way. We need to think, if somebody comes to you today, if say it's one of your customers, one of your stakeholders, or even one of your bosses, and they say, I can't believe this. This takes 10 days for you to tell me there's a problem like this. There your creativity comes in. That's where your innovation kicks in, because you hear a problem statement, you immediately jump in. Even if you're not a process expert, I'm not always a process expert, let me be honest about it. But I think I'm creative, and that's more at a personal front, definitely not at work. I am very, very limited on my creativity at work. But I think from time and again, there are questions that come in on innovation. There are questions that need to come in from a creative standpoint. What are the other skill sets that are needed? Strategic mindset. The thought of saying, somebody had the thought, right? Bank queues will come down. That the airports, the way we do business will change. Today, somebody has a thought that, you know what, when I go in, there are banks out there are hospitals out there where the whole 20-day loan process is down to 2 minutes. Imagine that for a minute. One of the solutions that I have seen is in UK, I think, where the passports, where you have to renew the passport. I don't know if you guys had to go through the process of renewing passport even in India, but it takes like a few days. You go through the online process, you fill up the form, you go show your face, you go submit the documents, you come out, and then you wait for the new passport to come in. If you're in a hurry, you get it in 3 days. 3 days. When you're traveling, 3 days is a luxury. But there are processes out there in UK which do it in 20 minutes, which means you right there put your passport in, and this is touchless, which means that you don't talk to anybody. You go put your old passport, you put your, social security or the equivalent in UK. I don't quite remember right now what they use, but a similar one where you put your ID and you put in a couple of other things that are needed, a pay slip, sorry, saying that you've made the payment for the new passport in designated places. The system scans it and says your documentation is fine. Here's your new passport in the next 20 minutes. Before you walk out of the place, you have your new passport you're walking out of. Now that's somebody's mindset. Somebody came up with that idea. Somebody said that I don't want to go through this pain because I missed out on, say, traveling for XYZ reason, and that resulted in so many issues. And sometimes it's not necessary it's work related. It could be a pain point you're facing at home front or at a personal life. You hear a story from your family, from friends. That's a good place to start. What do we mean by data savvy? Data savvy, like I was mentioning, it might just be helpful to see the numbers, because sometimes if you're focusing on, say, a problem statement which makes no impact to anybody, would there be a lot of takers for it? There will be, but only when its time comes. Right now, they will have much more bigger issues to fry. So it's the whole point of, I think, in a quality term, for a moment, I will shift and use a jargon, which is an 80-20 rule, a Pareto rule in quality, which says if you have 80% of the problem, that's in your top 20% of the category. What does that mean? That means that if you try to fix the rest of the 80% of the issues as well, you're only going to get benefits which are so small and so little that the effort that goes into it, do you really want to get into? But if you focus on the top issue that is there right now as a process, as an organization, as an individual, even at a home front, my financials may be not looking good. Say, my salary just ran out. Will it help me focusing that the $5 I spent on buying a chocolate the other day because I was indulgent? Or will it help that I keep thinking, oh, I keep going to Starbucks quite a bit? That's $250 every single day. That means that's X amount every month that I'm spending. It would focus on the big wins than the small wins. And that is why the data savvy there helps. It's not just the data savvy of trying to understand the data, but it's also about which ones do you focus on. It also goes back to being a bit strategic in that sense. Now, business acumen. Now, this business acumen is basically understanding the process. Like I was mentioning, if you're smart, you understand the process today, the way it exists, it makes a huge difference. Because remember one thing, you could be on the other side moving into automation, or you could still stay in your own current role in your current business, but your roles will change a bit because you are already an expert. You understand the business the way it works. You understand step two missed can be all the rest of the steps can just fall into like a house of cards. They're just going to fall flat. They're not going to work through that. To be able to say that the step two is the most crucial. I want this to be validated. I want this to be validated 100% of the times. I don't want it to be just left on a sample check. That is business acumen. That is being smart about your business. That's being knowing what works well. Relationship management. Let's talk about this for a second. I think it's extremely important because this is something that the technology will never be able to do, which is building relationships. While I've seen some robots that do a bit of relationship management, but I think still a whole lot that I think is needed here. I think a good doctor would make a big difference when they're having a nice conversation. A good doctor will also be constituting to the fact that when I am able to share my personal story of saying, I have XYZ, but there are doctors that I don't feel like sharing that with. There are people I don't want to share that at the airport. But there are people whom will you just open up to. That relationship management is crucial. These are skills that will always be needed. These are skills that every time will be needed, not just today, 20 years, 30 years from now. It is even needed at home front, right? There are times that we can approach our parents for a specific thing we make a mistake with, but there are times that we can't, and that's the relationship. Agility and change. I think I don't need to talk much about this, but if I were to talk about it, it's about be the change. Be open to change, because if you're not, somebody else will anyways. If you're not quick enough figuring out what is it that's needed in my business, somebody else will, because it's an opportunity for them. It's like, if I don't take the opportunity of talking today, do you think somebody would have waited for me to talk? Not really. There are people out there who will speak. There are people out there who will think. There are people out there who will articulate. And I think that's very important for us to focus on. I'm going to stop here because I know a whole lot of questions came in on this particular species, on this particular, I was going to say species, definitely not skills, and saying what kind of skills are needed if you were to move into automation kind of roles. And I think if you do have questions, feel free to either chat up or unmute yourself and talk through. And silence means I will just move on. Okay. I'm not hearing, so I'm just going to move on. Now, these are the personas. And again, when I say personas, I just wanted to, be more techie here. The personas that will be needed to look at the work that we do today. Like I said, the problem solvers in different terms. I think there's something here. Okay, thanks so much, Manjula. So, problem solvers. Now, like I said, there could be different ways where you hear the problem in your organization at personal front. Keep in mind that when you're hearing a problem, it's very, very easy, especially even for me. It's very easy when somebody comes up to me and says, there's a problem. How can you take this much time to just tell me this simple little problem? And the first response is like, no, but this is how the process is, but this is how things are. It takes so much time, and you know how this is. It's very easy to defend that problem. It's very, very easy and convenient to say that it's not me and it's not what I did. It's about the process, and it means that there is a whole thing out there, or this is how the industry operates, or this is how the workplace operates, or this is how, my organization operates. It's very easy to say that, but it's very easy to take, much more difficult to take a step back and say, this is a problem. Let's look at how I can solve it. Let's look at, is there a way within my confined boundaries, which means that, yes, I'm working for an organization, I'm working for a role, but how can I solve this? How else can I come up with solutions? Some of the things that we do over here, even right now in RPA, I mean, people would say that, what is it that you would do after a point? I mean, you've figured out what is needed to be done, automate whatever is mundane or repetitive, and where it does not need judgment, go ahead and do it. It's a simple formula. Just put it in the formula and you're done. But I don't think so. I have my constant connect with people in the industry, and I try to understand, how is it that they are solving their problems? Because I've been in this role for 3 years. Sometimes I don't see the problem at all. I'm like, oh no, this is not a problem. This is how it works. But it's easy to talk to somebody out there, attending conferences, attending summits, attending talks, having conversations with people outside, and sometimes even just looking at the outside industry. Oh, this is how it works in airline industry. I don't work in the airline industry, but why don't laptops work this way? Why don't we do similar role? Why don't we have such an effortless? Why isn't there an Uber for a nanny? Like, this was my idea when I was struggling with my daughter's nanny, just to kind of call out. So these are the kind of things we think of, problem solvers. Think of problems and try to solve them. Possibility, like I mentioned, easy to kind of mistake the problem does not exist. Techno geek. Techno geek is basically, now I used to be a techno geek, but I don't know if I am anymore. But I still try to talk to people to understand what's new in the industry. And a whole lot of technology exists, a whole lot of tools exist. Every day there are new startups being built, and startups are close to my heart because my husband's into a startup. But there's just so much out there. How do you keep up with it? How do you keep up with what's going out there? Sometimes you read it in the papers, which is very limited. Sometimes you subscribe yourself to a whole lot of things that are happening in the industry. Again, limited, but there's so much more that's going on. I think it's very, very, very important for us to call out and figure out that what other things exist. How is it that it's relevant for us? The search that I do today on Google for a problem that I have might result in completely different in 2 days from now. That's because there's something new out there. And I think that's a question. I'll take a pause for that. Can you see a future where robots can be used for safety and security? Okay, like if someone is in need for help, information is readily available. Okay, so let's take a step back and let me answer that in two folds. Are robots helpful for safety and security? Definitely think so. Now think of a good example. Have you guys seen today how it exists in our societies? I have a watchman, and who basically would, I'm just giving you a traditional, or let me take a step back and I'll say the example I had, like when I was growing up, there was a watchman in my apartment who would stand there. He was, I'm sorry to say this, I don't want to make it I'm not trolling on him at this moment, but he was a 4 foot nothing. I could, as a kid, I think if I would hit him, he would fall down. There was really no safety or security, but yet he was the watchman in my apartment. If a new person came in, he would ask a lot of questions with authority, saying, who are you? Why are you here? What is it for? And back then, there were no Amazons and Flipkarts as well. So there was really not a whole lot of delivery people who came in, which were new to him. If people came in, it's the same dhoodwala, the same dhobiwala, and the same guys who were coming in, the vegetable vendors. So it was pretty much repetitive. The new guys that came in, he would question a lot. And people who are dressed well, most likely not so much question, because he thought they were the guest of our houses. Let's forward it today. Today, in my apartment, in my gated community, we have something called My Gate. It's a startup. It's been a startup for about 6-7 years. People who were in the military, and I've had the luxury to converse with those owners over there who came up with the My Gate concept, or it's even existing in Adda. There is basically, what you have is an app. It's on my phone, and I'm more than happy to show for those who are on the video. So this is basically an app where you would key in your regular helpers, because there are a whole lot of people who come into your houses these days, which are not always the known category. Every day, almost, let me rephrase. In a week, I have at least 10 people who are new faces who are walking into my apartment. And I'm not a very social person, just to call out. These are people from Amazon, from Flipkart, from my bank, from Blue Dart, from XYZ, and somebody just dropping in for pickup or something like that. So I have this whole lot of people, and cabs, to call out specifically. These are my top, I think, 20-30%, if I were to call out this way. But what my gate does, and this is my app, just for those who can see it, it says very clearly, my regular helpers are already called out. So my regular helpers are not called out in terms of, I don't get a phone call every single day to be saying that, hey, your maid's coming. Do you really want to check her in? Here's your cook. He's coming. Do you really want to check him? Your nanny's coming. Do you really want to check her in? No, I don't get those phone calls. But I do get a phone call, anybody who's not in that category. I have to approve it. That's safety and security at a paramount level, which means that it is at a level that we guys are at. But this is an app. How does robotics come into picture? I've seen this in the US and in UK to an extent, having the security systems. And I think that's called the Google Nest as well. I was doing a bit of research to try and see if I need that as well. I'm always looking at new gadgets. So the Google Nest, just imagine if you take it to the next level. And for those who don't know Google Nest, let me take a step back. It's a security system which you have basically on your, as soon as you walk into your house, it says, good morning, Meera. The weather today is XYZ. Would you want to dim the lights, or would you want to turn on the geyser right now? Looks like it's a hot weather or a cold weather. Would you want a bath? So it would look at that kind of stuff, and it would help me out with my day-to-day activity. But it would also, what it would do is basically call out for any security breaches. Things like the alarms would be connected. So it's a bit of an IoT in that sense, because it's connecting my alarm, my fire safety, with my lights, with my all my equipments at home, my music system, my TV, every gadget that's there at home is connected, but it does make a person safe and secured. There are also, and this is again, I'm more than happy to share some of the examples. I don't remember at the top of my head. There are startups that are working on the safety and security aspect of it, which means, and I think, let me just take a step back here. I think the question and the line of question that just made me think, robotics is not always where you see a physical robo. I'm in an industry, I work in robotics, there's no physical robo. I've never seen a robo. Let me just rephrase. I don't know how my robos work. If I were to call out, and if you were to just specifically say, can you show me a robo? I can show it to you in a system, which means it will do exactly the same steps as a human would. So what does it mean? Let's take, the same point that I was talking about, being a process expert. It does the existing process, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And it would do all the steps that have been defined by any of us or a solution evangelist. It would be developed by a developer. And what would happen? It would carry out these steps. And that is what you will see a robo performing. So if I were to do that, or if a robo were to do that, it's very difficult for a person who's never seen robo in action to make out a difference, because the clicks will be very similar, where it moves will be very, very similar. So again, coming back, the reason I touched upon that is because you will never see physical robos always. That sentence didn't make sense. You will sometimes see physical robos, not always. And in case of safety and security as well, you're likely to see physical robos only when there is a need. Otherwise, it's going to be mostly things that are in the background. Like I mentioned, anything that breaches your current way of working, anything that is identified as an exception. And I don't know if it makes sense. So I'm going to take a pause and say, Deepika, does that answer your part of the question? Okay. What typically makes an RPA team in a corporate? What typically makes an RPA team in a corporate, I think, is the need. First of all, do your leadership, do your people buy into the fact that RPA is something that's the need of the hour? Do you need to automate? Do you need to move your current processes to the next level? if you're operating in, say, an X percentage, do you, in terms of accuracy, do you want to move it up? Do you want to, I'll give you a good example here. Uh, we are in the finance organization today. The RPA that we work, majority of it is in the finance organization. One wrong payment means a wrong payment to, say, a BESCOM, and our bills run up to obviously lakhs and lakhs of rupees for one facility in a month. So say if it is a duplicate payment, if it's making a payment again, that's a duplicate payment. So if it's 10 lakhs, if you make a second payment of 10 lakhs, it's just straight up 10 lakhs of loss. How would we make, why would we want to automate this process? Because we don't want duplicate payments. Identifying the problem and calling it out that we don't want this problem, that is when it comes up with what an RPA team is. Who decides what to automate? Like I said, I think usually leadership would come up with, say, a statement. And even when we started out, the leadership came up with saying, there's a lot of mundane activity. I don't want to do this mundane activity. Can we look at how we can improve our accuracy, or how can we reduce our exposure to risk? And these were the kind of problem statements that came up. And how can we have high ROI? Initially, it started off with also reduction in like refilling the same workforce, which means that the workforce had to start focusing on something else that was coming in. We had a bigger pipeline coming in. So we said we wanted to direct our workforce there. Problem statements like that triggered an RPA team. But there are also problem statements that trigger in different ways, like to imagine, let's not do data entry. Let's start focusing on how we can solve, we are in the line of, say, relationship management. If you're, say, a country club, you're in the whole line of calling people, having an interaction, but how would that interaction become meaningful? That's a problem statement that people would want to come up with. What is the scope of RPA in e-commerce industry apart from chatbot? In the e-commerce industry, there's a whole lot out there that I can think of. Wait a second, did I miss a question? Who decides what to automate, and on what, on who helps understand what's automatable? What's automatable? I think I didn't cover that topic, and let me just maybe touch upon that as well. So what to automate is something that, let's just go back. I'm not able to move up my slides. Where is it? Yeah, where is it? To a large extent, it would be the solution evangelist. To a large extent, it could also be a process owner. It could also be a business growth partner. Different people can decide what and how should the automation take place and where should we automate. But specifically getting into the steps of it, saying that this is in scope and this is not in scope, is a solution evangelist. The solution evangelist will very clearly call out saying that, this is a process right now. This needs a lot of thought process. And I'll go back to the example that I was giving in the start. If you know your step 2 is so crucial that nobody should make a miss, even a 99.9% accuracy will not help, then you will make sure that there is a certain plan in place, which is a quality check in place. And to do that, either you would add a robo on top of a human activity, or even if there is a robo that's processing, you will add a human being on top of it. That kind of decisions are done by the solution evangelist. And that needs process expertise, which means that you could be an SME today in your current business, and you come up with saying that this is what I think can be automated and this is what I don't think can be automated. But it also needs a little bit of know-how of what is technically possible, like from a development standpoint. Like a human eye can identify. Let me just give you a very, very simple example. Google page keeps changing every day. It's so easy for me to go into a Google page, type in my issue or the thing that I'm searching. A robo can't do that because the placement of the Google tab is constantly changing. It's moving up and down, left and right, here and there. Halloween is there, it goes completely somewhere else. If there is a Diwali, it comes down somewhere else. That tab, when it's moving, the place or the bar where you're entering the details, that changes. A solution evangelist is going to say that entry is going to be still human being because this is changing dynamically. Stuff like that. It's very easy for a human being to catch it, but a robo will not. Okay, I hope I've answered that question, Amrita. What's the scope of RPA in an e-commerce industry? In an e-commerce industry, apart from chatbot, I think chatbot is one way to do it. What's the second way or the advanced way of going into it would be the data that comes in with the chatbot, which means that I'm sorry. So what comes with it is basically so one way would be that today, if I'm reaching out to my chatbot to ask for an information on a basic level of questioning, say I want to buy a car, and I say, how can I go about buying a car? This is my budget. I can go into chatting about it. But what if I had to go through the entire process of submitting my documents and getting the car in the next 20 minutes or whatever is the turnaround time? Uh, that is also possible because that would be your next level of robotics coming in, next level of data scientists coming in, and that's robotics plus on top of it you have the systems integrations coming in, still part of robotics, but you're adding intelligence to it because you're saying that this is where majority of our cases come in. So these are seamless processing because if you submit ABCD documents, your processing will be done. So that's data scientist role coming in. So these are the things that come in, at least on an opportunity on an e-commerce side that I can think of. There are a whole lot out there, and I think I need that question to be a little more elaborated, if you don't mind. Vaishnavi, I hope that answers the question. And if there is a follow-up on that, feel free to type in. The next one is, how do you decide what a certain RPA implementation is successful? Because the bots also tend to crash pretty often. Now that's a big statement, by the way. So the crashing happens, in my opinion, is when your processes are not strong, which means that if your coding is not strong, if your process definition is not strong, which means you're asking a robot to think, like I gave you an example of Google. As a human being, you'll say, what's the big deal? You can see it's right there. Nothing has changed on the page. It's the same Google page. How can you not understand? The robo will not. And that's when your robo will fail. That's when your robo will not work. That's where somebody who's from a technical standpoint, who's a developer or who's, a solution architect on the technical side, will need to say, this is possible, this is not. Trying to automate something that needs even a little bit of judgment has to be thought through very well. Can you break down your process into steps? Can you break it down into steps with screenshots? Questions like this get asked, and they're very, very basic questions. People get irritated sometimes when we go back and say, is this how it's supposed to be done? Can you do this the same thing, say 10 days from now? Will even a single step change? If the answer is yes, it can change, it's possible, then we say no, robotics does not come into picture and automation does not come into picture. So then what we do is, and this is where the innovation needs to come in, we say we do step 1 to step 3 because this is where it's a straightforward step. The step 4 seems to be a slightly judgmental. Why don't you pick it up? Let's come back. Step 5 to step 8 is going to be done by robotics. That decision of being able to put your foot down and saying that the step 4 is not something that we will automate is also needed because you are able to think from an overall success criteria to be able to say that this is the only way how success will happen. Also, I've noticed robos crash is when the processes are not efficient, which means your processes are not standard, your processes haven't gone through that quality check, the projects that needs to go through the BPM methodology to be able to make your projects very, very efficient. You should have gone through all that layers first, because if the steps today 1 to 20 can become 1 to 10 in a smart way, or even if the step 1 to 20 can become 1 to 30, but it can become in a very, very seamless way, in a very, very whatever is your business metric, say it's making sure that the payments are happening, it's making sure that the patients who are walking in are walking out with, say, X percentage of health, lesser health issues. If that's your success metric, keeping that in mind is extremely important for any automation that you're building in. So I hope I've answered that question on how do we make sure that they crash. I think the crash itself is what we need to kind of focus on. How do we avoid that crash? How do we reduce that crash? Is there a certain automation framework which is followed as a thumb rule in the RPA world now? In terms of automation framework, I mean, I'll be very, very honest. This industry has existed for a while now. It has been around for a while, like I said, but I think there's a whole lot that everybody's doing what works best for them. We're doing something that I don't think anybody in the industry is doing. And it's because we are building in robotics on top of things where we know for a fact we can't hire workforce. We're facing issues to hire workforce because we know for a fact people can't come in. But these are gaps that nobody wants to pick up. No human being wants to sit and now do data entry. That's the kind of problem statements we are coming up with. So even though it's a new process, it's not been there for a while, it's just completely new. We're trying to address that kind of issues. So I think the opportunity or the framework changes from industry to industry, company to company, team to team. And I think that's very, very important, because don't be very rigid on a certain framework. Like I was talking about, be a change catalyst. Be open to the fact that if there is a DMAC, or if there is a PM methodology, PMP methodology, or if there is an ISO framework, don't be very rigid that I have to follow it to the dot. Unless and until you're in the risk and compliance business, you have to follow the guidelines. But if you can change the methodology, what works best for you, I think might be a good idea. That's what I would say, because we've changed we've had some steps, we've removed some steps, we keep adding some steps, we keep removing it. That it's every 6 months we keep changing. So sometimes when people say 1 year ago we did it this way, we're like laughing, saying that that's not the framework we follow anymore, because it's not making sense. So the framework is very, very dependent on which industry and where you are at this moment, Namrata. Okay, let me move to the next one. Vaishnavi, what are the opportunities we can look for? Is this opportunity as career? Sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to stop when we are running out of time as well, as a timekeeper. Sorry.
Sure. Okay, so what I can do is, and here's what I can offer my email address and people can drop in an email, or Manjula, if there is a better way, I'm okay. I'm happy to.
We will quickly answer that. My suggestion would be just run the presentation. At least people will just get to know what you're trying to give the picture. And there are other questions also we have to do it. I will just quickly skim through and then tell you, so that people will also hear from you. They wanted to hear from you as well, the answers for the question.
Okay.
Okay, fine.
Sure. I think I'm pretty on that point, Manjula. The reason I also picked up questions is I'm almost at the end of the presentation, and I knew there were a lot of questions on the skill, or the things that are needed, or the kind of opportunities that will come in an automation space. I've put in over here because I think a whole lot of people can relate to it. If you already have children, or if you have nieces and nephews, this is something that you can relate to. Most of us are the millennials, as we are called. We have kids who are called as Generation Alpha, or the current generation is called the Generation Alpha, anybody born after 2010. These children are born with iPads, smartphones, even though, like, my daughter is not allowed to use a screen more than 5 minutes a day. I know for a fact she's so much more well versed with my smartphone than I am, and or my husband is. And it's because she looks at technology as a part of her day-to-day life. It's an integrator. It's not separate from my daughter. It's a part of her life. This is going to be part of her life. And as a person, if I need to get through the next generation, which we will have to, right, at some point in time, in our meetings, we'll also have Generation Alpha coming in and giving their suggestions, or being on the phone constantly. And I bet during this conversation as well, a lot of you have got some pings and you had to respond either on the chat or either on the phone. I think it's important that we realize this and we understand that how technology is making a difference in that way, how transformational it is. And I think it's part of the future, whether we like it, we don't like it. It's going to be something that's going to be, but I think it's important for us to keep it as a takeaway that if we can make it an enabler, if we can make it an integrator, like the way our kids are seeing it today, doesn't always have to be just watching videos, but there's a whole lot of things that are there out there. Like, I'm impressed by Khan Academy, for example. I know it's not the topic of discussion today, but it's something that there is out there for children. I don't think I would have been able to articulate the way, say some of these startups are able to do with children. So I think it's very, very smart. And I think technology has to be looked at that way. And I would like to kind of just, I think I did touch upon this, but this is just like the ending slide here. How can you do something that's amazing? Imagine the future you want to have, be intellectually curious, break the rules, but explain why, which means that it's okay to go ahead and break rules because you're trying to change the way things are working. But there, from time and again, of course, you will have to answer to somebody for that. Take charge of your destiny. Think about the culture. Use technology and analytics to reframe the conversation. So I think this is where this is where my presentation, I think, ends, or if there is a quote at the end. Yes. So this is where it is, Manjula, but what do you want to do now? And I'm going to take a
Thank
pause.
you so much. And now we can pick up the questions. Maybe a couple of questions, maybe we'll pick up from the people who asked. And we'll come back after one, two, or three. We'll come back to this question as well. Quickly, let's just do that.
Sure, sure.
Right. Okay. So let me just pick up the questions what I've shared to you.
Mm-hmm.
Just a second. Right. Yeah, the first one is a couple of them. If you have answered, we can also skip, but I'll just skim through the question. How easy or difficult is to learn another automation tool when you know one?
I think it's quite versatile, and these days robotics or automation is happening within the automation industry, which means recently we did a workshop in a very simple way, if I can explain. The entire VP staff sat in for their board meeting, and they were asked to automate. Imagine VPs who've never ever automated or done a development code in their lives. That's how easy it is. It was drag and drop, drag and drop, drag and drop, drag and drop. That's it. Follow a series of instructions, drag and drop. It was as simple as that. By the end of it, they had an automation tool where they would extract data and upload something. So, which was amazing. So I think a lot of automation, like I was saying, is already happening, excuse me, in the automation industry itself. If you know a tool, it's fairly very easy to learn another one. It's just like development. I've done development. I can tell you, if you understand C, maybe going to a Java is not that hard. Going to an SQL is not that hard. It's fairly, you understand the concept. That's what it is.
Right. So the next one is please throw some light on classic use cases where RPA is being implemented in the industry right now, and also what is the success rate of automation bots wherever implemented? Are they stable, and how well do they scale with changes in underlying system? You spoke about couple of implementations
Yes.
from the airport and the bank and etc. And if at all you wanted to end or share some final pointers, feel free to pick it up. Or we can
I
just
think I think did speak about even buying a car and stuff like that. So live examples. I think if there are any more examples specifically that you're looking for a specific industry, feel free to chat up, and I think I can give
perfect.
that. But
Okay,
I think we covered that, Manjula.
we'll move on then. So the next one is how is automation relevant to HR function? That also you
We
spoke
spoke about Paybot. Yeah, we spoke about payrolls and
payroll
stuff. Yeah.
and the systems. I'll move on. I have 7 years of experience in manual testing. After that, I took a break. Now I'm going to start my career again. So, planning to learn RPA as this is the most popular tool. Tell me your suggestions.
So you've taken a break and you're coming back to RPA. You want to come back to RPA. I think it's important to understand where you come from, or rather, let me just take a step back and say, what is it that you want to get into? You've seen the kind of roles that are there out there. You can even be just your process expert, so which means that whatever you had, you take off from there and move on to the next direction. Or you say, no, I want to become, say, a solution evangelist, or I want to become, say, a person who's very good with, say, rules, so which means I go into the compliance aspect of it. Or say, I'm very good with interaction, so let me become the funnel engagement lead or something like that. So it depends on the skill sets that you see and the traits that you can match with each one of them, and be open to change. That's the only thing that I would say. Like I said, we've all moved around quite a bit.
Yes. So the leading question, apart from RPA developer, do we have other career options? I think you just touched upon just now about the other roles part of it. So typically, just to add it, you have a support functions and you have your architect and business development, all those functions. But however, if at all we are talking about the RPA, my suggestion would be have a basic understanding and nuances of the tool as well as how it is what we expect it to be.
Manjula, I don't know if it's just me, but I kind of lost you there.
Oh, okay. Am I audible now? Is that
Yes, 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 yes.
right? So I was just sharing it. Other apart from RPA developer, there are very well multi functionalities available to pick it up. But if we are since we are talking about RPA, the basic understanding has to be there. Knowing about what is RPA, the base tool, whatever you are available, at least at the foundation level, then you can just figure it out where you want it to go. That's all is a suggestion over here. And the
Yeah.
next question would be your RPA, which tool has a good scope? Go ahead, Meera.
I think, this is again trends that are changing, right? I mean, Crayon started off, then there was the UiPath came in. At the same time, we had Blue Prism. Blue Prism was turning out to be very, very expensive. So UiPath came up with its own strategy to be low cost, yet very, very versatile. Then UiPath became the number one. So I think this trend is constantly changing. Every year or every second year, we see somebody who's taking up. And there are a whole lot of startups I've met. I keep meeting during my work. I think it all depends on the budget that is there, the focus that is there, how large scale or small scale do you want to go into automation. If you really want to go into large scale, you don't mind the investment. If it's a small scale, do you mind having an end-to-end solution through somebody else? That's the question that you need to ask.
Right,
So there are, like I said, I mean, there are enough and more than enough startups who also do just an end-to-end chatbot service. It's very simple. Why would you develop a tool when somebody's already doing it? So that's the kind of enabler that you need to think and your priorities. But I know for a fact, like we also went ahead and decided what parts will be outsourced, what parts will be staying with us, because it makes sense. It's about the time factor. You have the time, you develop it. You have the skill sets, develop it. You don't have it, you move on.
right. Okay, good. So the next one is would like to know the career opportunity in automation.
I think we spoke about it. No, do you want me to cover more on it?
We spoke about it. If at all you wanted to just tell them, automation again, you have to just pick up some of the tool and the process and connect the dots. The moment you are able to do that magic, then you can just based on your interest, as you rightly have the slide, not this slide, the other slides which you're talking about relationship and mining the data.
Yes.
You can just do that magic around. But especially Meera here, probably I will mention people have just come from the break. It's just going to take some time for them to just find that path, right? So that is
Yeah. Yeah.
be a little bit of patience in reskilling yourself and taking couple of projects
Yes.
to prove yourself. Then getting back to the opportunity with the corporate is pretty easy. So that is
Yeah.
where I would like to just pitch in over here.
And I think it's also the fact, Manjula, like if I'm taking a break, before I took a break, it's important that I would ask myself, what was I good at? Or right now, what am I good at? Sometimes when we take a break, our perspective changes completely. Like if I was good in say technical aspect, I suddenly say no, but I want to do something else. So it's possible that the break itself has made you think differently right now. Look at what skills do you have today as a human being. And I think that's why the whole unicorn example was there, I started off with, is because you need to understand what your special power is. Are you good at questioning the process? Are you good at constantly providing solutions to people? Or are you good at comforting people? Which means that when you're good at comforting people, say your friends are very comfortable to come over and cry on your shoulder, you are a relationship manager already at some level. That's what you need to think of. Think a little more deeper on already the things that you're very good at.
Tell me about your break, Meera. I just thought we will also just know more about that. Just share some insights about that.
I didn't take a break. I actually was quite the opposite. I had my baby in on October 21st. I was back in work in January. So I really never took a break. And I was working until the 20th of October. So no, I really never took a break. I've never had the opportunity to take a break while I would love to, because I think I would love to go on a trek to Himalaya and just reflect on what do I want to do in my life and figure out my calling. But no, I haven't had the luxury, Manjula, for ever to take a break.
Okay, good. Okay,
Yeah.
because I was just seeing your LinkedIn profile where you were part of once at the Titan part of it, right? So that's where completely
Yeah.
different.
No, I'm sorry if that gave the impression. I'm sorry. I thought I would.
Okay.
There is a question out here, Manjula, which is quite different from, I think, that question's from Radhika. I have
Yeah.
5 years of experience in Java development. With switching to RPA mean loss of all the development experience? And I think this is what I think a lot of people would have questions. I'm guessing that would I lose all the skill sets that I already have? I don't think so. And I think which is why it's important for you to connect the dots. Do you want to continue to be in development side, Radhika? That's a question you ask yourself. Do I enjoy Java development? If I do, then it's something that you want to get more into. And you will never lose your experience. Please remember this, guys. I think it's an important thing, not just for this session, but for anything. If you've had some experience with you, whatever experience, and you've taken a break, you needed that break. Don't have to justify it to anybody in the world. You're coming back. None of that experience is going to be lost. That break experience, the prior to break experience, is never going to be lost, because it gives you a fresh perspective. It gives you a perspective to walk in. Yes, when you come back, even after 2 months, when I came back, I felt I had to justify to everybody that I'm a mother now and I can still do my job. But nobody asked me to. And I think that's important as people, that you remember that, we have this constant guilt factor that when we take a break, and especially women, I think, do this. Well, I don't want to generalize. Don't be under that guilt conscious. I think when you get back, your experience, your break, your family values will all come in somewhere and converge into your work experience. If you're good at something, you are good at that.
Excellent. Good. So thanks for that. And there is a last question. Let's also just finish with that
Sure.
Vrindas, so that at least the Q&A has been just complete. I just want to just talk about the Vrindas one. Please elaborate on compliances and how the risk management take place in RPA. Is there any regulatory body for handling this stuff, or there are any other standard identified to comply certain process?
Again, this risk is a fairly topic which I think is which is in the automation industry is still like everything else is at a nascent stage, which means that there's a whole lot out there, as you know, for every tool that gets developed. If you're on the technical side, or even if you just read enough news, for every ATM that gets built, there are people who are looking at how to hack it. For every system that gets built, there are people out there, professional and non-professional people, who are looking at hacking it out there. So risk and compliance is always at a top priority for any company. Individuals, as an individual, I am also very threatened by not using common wi-fi's when I walk into a coffee day or something. It's about the fact that risk and compliance is important to an individual level, at a company level, at an organization level. Is there some things out there as regular guidelines? There are. But are those guidelines something that the risk and compliance people who are breaking, or the hackers, don't know of? They do. Can there be more to it? Definitely, yes. And to add to it, I think, is there something that's been built? There is a whole lot that gets built every single day on risk and compliance. Even right now, we have, like, X number of bots, and we're constantly looking at how do we make them more and more compliant? How do we make them risk free? While we're doing that, we are either interacting with somebody in the industry, or we are coming up with our own strategies. So again, this is a question that comes up back to you. If you are, say, in the risk and compliance area, you will have certain, say, SOX, certain, say, compliance factor, ISO, guidelines, whatever is your industry, whichever space you are in, there are certain guidelines that are there to follow them. But also on top of it, when you're adding, say, a human being, even a workforce, you make sure that the ID is compliant. You make sure that if the person goes absconding, you want to make sure that their ID is deactivated. If you do that to a human being, you have to do that to your digital workforce. There's no difference, if I can answer that question.
Perfect. Okay. So thank you, Meera. It's lovely to be with you, and it's one of the half an hour session where we just break the rule and then just continue. And completely everyone is glued with your session. Awesome to just see that as well. So that's the beauty of the session. And thank you so much for patiently telling us. And we look forward to bring you back and then take your some more time to just get your more wisdom. And the team, feel free to just share your questions to Meera. I think Meera, you want us to share your email ID? I'm happy to do that. Or
I just did it on the group and I'll send it to you and you can feel free to send it. I'm more than happy to take up questions. So
awesome.
thanks so much for being patient and listening in.
Yes, so we have also given the feedback link for all of you. Just share us the feedback about what you felt and what else we can just help you. So that will help us to find out more session. And followed by Meera, where there is another UiPath session also we are keeping it to making sure automation you are comfortable. Just join us and then connect with us all the time. We are here to help you. Thank you, Meera, and love you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.